So can everybody see the share?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. So welcome to Tribe Talk, 10 May 2020. Group of like-minded people, wonderful people getting together to talk about being rider coaches. And hopefully, and this is something I've thought about a lot this week, we need to enhance our communications. And going back in my past, everything that didn't work out for an organization typically hinged on communication. So that's an important piece of what Tribe Talk is about. This is an independent event, not sponsored by any organization, regardless of who shows up. And it's the one motive is to improve the tribe and create responsible thinking motorcyclists. Tonight, and I will change that eventually, but it still like brings me back to my childhood and, you know, places me in that beginner mindset of learning. Certainly, these are the etiquette. Nothing really has changed here. If you do talk about something specific to your area or your jurisdiction, please let us know that it's a jurisdictional issue. Put it in context for us so that as people respond, they can understand a little bit better. Lurkers are welcome. You don't have to talk, but we do hope that you will, because this should be a free-flowing conversation about everything that comes in tonight. This is what's going to happen for our topics tonight. Possible changes in rider education with Mr. Dan Petterson. Everybody wave at Dan. So glad that you're here. And then we're going to break off into some small groups tonight and work on the challenge that I put up a little over a week ago to just discuss what we think our top 10 competencies, characteristics, and traits for rider coaches should be, followed by questions from Dr. Ochs at MSF and some parting shots. Whoops, sorry about that. I'll get it right. Dan, are you ready to put up your slides?
All right, thank you very much, Don. I appreciate the invitation. I'd also like to thank each of you participating in Tribe Talk. I, for one, truly appreciate your dedication to motorcycle safety, and especially to the craft of coaching. The goals for this presentation are, number one, to introduce those of you who don't know about Smarter to a very valuable resource. Number two, to briefly review the research regarding the effectiveness of rider education training. And three, to offer some ideas regarding possible changes to both training curriculum and to the broader delivery of a comprehensive motorcycle safety program. I have 16 slides to share. I plan to move relatively quickly and save time for discussion at the end. So, Smarter, the acronym for our association is Smarter. You can see the full name on the slide. Smarter is a 501c3 nonprofit education association. We were incorporated in 2007. We are a board of directors managed association with individual memberships. Smarter wants riders and decision makers to make decisions based on knowledge, facts, and research. So our mission is to provide a one-stop spot for accessing research and facts regarding motorcycle safety. And our web address is there on the slide. If you believe that it's important for you to have current and a high level knowledge regarding motorcycle safety research, then Smarter and the web address will be a valuable resource for you. Smarter has received recognition as a national resource from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration, and the National Transportation Safety Board. We also regularly and frequently partner with advocates for highway and auto safety and advocating for motorcycle safety issues on a national basis. We are a member of the Road to Zero Coalition, and we were the only motorcyclist association, in addition to the Motorcycle Safety Foundation, to be represented at the initial Road to Zero planning workshops. So this slide shows the categories of the research that we have posted, and we have a total of over 375 research reports. Rider training is just one part of a comprehensive motorcyclist safety program, and I would invite all rider coaches to expand their involvement in motorcyclist safety efforts beyond their coaching role to every extent that they possibly can. Motorcyclist safety needs the voices of responsible, trained, and educated riders. The information that I'm going to share here tonight, this evening, is a very quick and brief look at material that was published in our association's 2019 March-April member newsletter, which we have posted on our website under the research and then the drop-down menu for training. The training research I will refer to are attempts to evaluate the impact of rider training on the goal of reducing crashes and therefore the associated fatalities and injuries. There is no doubt that the current rider training does a great job of teaching people basic operational skills, but the question is, does rider training reduce crash risk? This slide provides an overview of the available rider training research. We have identified about 80 research studies and 2 high-quality literature reviews. We recommend reading lit reviews as a great way to begin understanding a particular topic. On our website, we're very selective about posting research. We very seldom post things that are older than 25 or 30 years. And so even though we've identified about 80 research studies, we have about a dozen or so of those studies posted on our website. Simply put, the research does not support the common assumption that trained riders are less likely to be involved in a crash. And some studies conclude that trained riders are more likely to be crash involved or to participate in risky riding behavior. So the question is, why might that be? Why doesn't the research confirm what so many motorcyclist safety advocates believe? The 2 most likely reasons are, number 1, the research isn't very good. And number 2, training really doesn't reduce crash risk. There certainly is an element of truth to number 1. However, there is some quality research and more research is emerging. The special edition of our newsletter that I mentioned and that we have posted as a historical summary of the research, so you can look at the research history and you can also review the posted research. If we are willing to be open-minded about the possibility that training as we currently know it is not effective at reducing crash risk, then we would ask, why is that and what might we do? Let's look at the why. Looking at the why, the number 1 indicator from the research is that training focuses on basic operational skills, and that it's widely known and accepted in the traffic safety world that operational skills are not a highly critical factor in reducing crash risk. The important factors have to do with responsibility, perception, judgment, and decision making. There are a couple of related reasons. The first one is connected to the concept of risk homeostasis, or risk offset as MSF defines the concept. We talked briefly about that at Wednesday's happy hour, and both Rita and Don have some great resources on the topic of risk homeostasis. Another idea is that even for programs that really address perception, judgment, and decision making, those concepts are not internalized by the participants because the participant focuses on learning the operational skills to ride the motorcycle, and all that other stuff is just too much for them to really absorb. And then there are some programs, some curriculums that do not include much about judgment and decision making to start with, and some programs that use the Motorcycle Safety Foundation curriculum, but they choose not to use the level 2 classroom material, which those concepts are addressed. So based on the research, here are 3 possible changes that the research suggests might be beneficial for rider training. The document that I've referred to and that's posted on our website outlines 8 possibilities. So I'd encourage you to check the document for more information and for more details. I'll just leave this up for a little while to let you read these 3 possible suggested changes that we can find in the research. So if these are possible curriculum changes that we might consider based on the evidence from the available research, this is 3 of 8 that we have listed in the document. But what about broader system changes? If it's true that training doesn't reduce crash risk, might we consider changes to the entire motorcyclist safety system in addition to changes in the curriculum? I certainly am one that thinks that it's time for us to do that. In my mind, we've been doing the same things over and over again for 30 to 40 years with little or no evidence that we're really saving lives. Training is mostly about basic operational skills, and virtually no one crashes because they lack basic operational skills. Crashing or not crashing is mostly about the rider as a person. It's not if or what kind or what amount of training that they have received. So here are my personal conclusions, and they're mine. This is not a Smarter position. Smarter has board adopted position statements posted on our website. This is not one of them. So I'm saying that on behalf of my board members. Aim your questions and your comments towards me, but remember to reserve the Smarter website as an excellent resource for accessing facts and research. So questions on this opinion, direct to me. Smarter as a great resource for research and facts. So here's some the contact information again down at the bottom. It was on the first slide. The web address is down at the bottom, smarter-usa.org. Email address for Smarter as an organization is the Gmail address, and my personal email address is down at the bottom. Here's some questions to consider. So I'll leave this slide up for a while. It has the contact information, and these are some questions that you might want to consider. And I'll send this back to Don. I'll leave this slide until Don tells me otherwise, but I'll send the conversation back to Don for facilitating some feedback or discussion if people want to do that. That's it. Thanks, Don.
So what does everybody have as questions for Dan? We have a wealth of information and resource here, and he's brought up some interesting ideas, some that we know and some that we may not have considered. What are your thoughts?
Dennis here in St. Louis. Dan, that page you have right there at the very top, be knowledgeable regarding motorcyclist safety research for coaches. I think that's a very excellent and very good statement, because, you know, there's a lot of research out there on motorcycle safety, and we don't know or haven't read all of it. I've read some of it, I'll admit, not a lot, and I'd like to read more. I guess the big thing is that we can, most coaches know of a place where we could find a lot of the research that's been done on motorcycle safety. Would be great.
That's the main mission of our association. So if you go to this web address, look at the main menus across the top. There's one labeled research. Go to the research, click on the research and main menu, and it has a drop-down menu, and there's about 12 or 13 categories there. They were displayed on a previous slide, those different categories. Choose the category of motorcyclist safety research you're interested in. Go to the category and look at it. Just to say again, posted on the website are someplace in the neighborhood of 375 research reports. So we either have the full research reports or we have abstracts of the research. With the references, you'll know exactly what they are, where they came from, what years they were.
Dan, how much, if any, of the research is based post the introduction of the level 2 classroom materials?
Virtually nothing. The rider training. It's a difference between. We've identified about 80 research studies that are targeted to try to evaluate the effectiveness of rider training for the reduction of crash risk. So we've identified about 80. We've only got 12, 13, 14 on our website, and the rest of the stuff is older, goes back into the 80s. So I'm not aware of any research related to the Motorcycle Safety Foundation curriculum after the introduction of the BRC or the BRC updated, certainly. Even the BRC, there really isn't anything after 201.
Okay.
There's research from other countries. One of them, for example, is a pretty good evaluation of a on-road coaching or mentoring program that came from Australia. There's some great research in Australia and New Zealand regarding rider training. So there's a very recent piece of research regarding, does an on-road rider coaching program help reduce riders' crash risk? I won't give you the answer. I'll let you go look it up. Thanks, Lynn.
Dan, Jeff in Massachusetts, one of my questions would be if the research may be poorly founded or ineffective, do you have some particular indications that might lead to that conclusion? And well, I'll start with that one.
Tell me more about what you mean might lead to that conclusion.
Well, you know, I'm looking at the graphic here that says on one end of the continuum, the research is crap. So there can be problems.
That was my down and dirty statement.
I'm sorry?
That was just, yeah, that was my down and dirty way to define
that's
a lot
fine.
of the research. Yeah.
Well, you know, inaccurate principles in, you know, drawing conclusions to research is just, you know, ineffective research, you know, to put it in non-judgmental terms. But were there pieces of information that pointed towards that you were able to identify, or do we just have a problem where we're finding particular answers because that's all we're looking for, you know, a self-fulfilling kind of a prophecy in research, or what?
I think there's some of all that involved. To be clear, the idea that the research isn't very good is not my idea. I'm looking at the experts that did reviews of the literature. So there's a review of the literature that was completed in 2009, and another high quality review of the literature that was completed in 2010. The 2009 review of the literature. So they look at everything that's available. They look at all these different possibilities, and they throw some research studies out because they just say the methodologies aren't sufficient to even be included in a quality review of the literature. So then those experts say, okay, here's some studies that meet the requirements for quality literature. Let's look at those and see what the conclusion is. The 2009 review of the literature said, our conclusion is that there's an inconsistency in the literature. Some literature says there's a positive effect, or some research says there's a positive effect, and some research says there's no effect, and some research says training increases rider crash risk. So the 209 made that conclusion. The 2010 review of the literature said the research is not of sufficient quality, even after we threw out a bunch of stuff and tried to hone in on the best. It's still not of a sufficient quality for us to make any kind of a statement about the impact of rider training. So two reviews of the literature, a small difference in their conclusions. One saying we can't give you an answer, and the other one saying the answer is inconsistent. Great question.
Oh, if I may, a follow-up question then. So was there any discussion about the fact that because the world is continually a dynamic and evolving environment, that the risks are changing, the size of automobiles, the prevalence of technology distracting drivers from the task, that sort of thing?
Yeah, there's newer stuff about that. These reviews of the literature that I'm talking about, conducted in 09 and 10, were already a decade and more out from when those were done. So there's some recent stuff about risk and risk analysis and changing risk, not directly related to how we're training, but the indications in the training would say to us whether we're going to be in a crash or not be in a crash has most to do about who we are as a person. How safety conscious are we? It has to do with perception, judgment, decision-making, responsibility. Whether we're going to be in a crash has very little to do with basic operational skills. So then we turn and we look at, well, what kind of training have we been doing for 30 or 40 years? Most of it is strongly focused on basic operation. Even if we look at the Motorcycle Safety Foundation curriculum, the updated version, we know that the updated version has some significant classroom materials directed at perception, judgment, and decision making. There hasn't been, I haven't been able to find anybody who has any research to try to see whether that change in the updated MSF curriculum has made any difference. I don't know that that's there.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Are there any other questions lingering out there? I think that's a very important thing that was just brought up. It's the human element and the judgment element that was so prominent in the updated curriculum. What are your thoughts on that?
This is Rick in New Jersey. That we touched on perception, judgment, decision making. How about behavior?
What are people's thoughts about that question?
Behavior is driven by people's attitudes. Their attitude leads what their behavior and choices are going to be and what decisions they're going to make.
Hi, this is Sarah from Chicago. My biggest question is, if we were to put together a study, how would we be able to accurately measure each of the past students' perception, judgment, and decision-making, and be able to follow them around and to be able to quantify it to show whether or not it is effective? What kind of scales would you use?
I think that's exactly why the reviewers of the literature in both the 209 review and the 2010 review, and what I talked about in terms of we can identify 75 or 80 studies that was their purpose, but that's a huge issue. It's a huge issue to try to control the variables. as we talk about in research. I mean, how can we be sure in any way, shape, or form that the treatment, i.e. participating in rider training, is what makes a difference? That's just huge.
Hi, Laura Holland, Twin Cities. I'm curious what you would say, Dan, to thinking about your idea of turning the operational element here, the motor skills, over to private enterprise and then government funding for all of the other things. It has occurred to me, and I'm thinking of this again now, that we kind of have a marketing problem in that the motor skill aspect of taking the BRC or learning to ride is, you know, the exciting thing that I think gets people interested in taking the class or getting training. And then the other stuff is like, well, that's kind of boring. So how would we get buy-in to the idea that all of the behavioral elements are really the most important thing?
And that's a huge question. This is a personal opinion of mine, and the reason I'm putting this out there is that these kind of things on the bottom of this slide: situational awareness, hazard perception, effective enforcement, remodeling the license system, all of those things have indication in the research that they are effective countermeasures. Some of them have been evaluated individually, but there's indications here and there that these things, that this stuff works. So if this stuff works to reduce crashes and or the resulting injuries from a crash, then I'm saying that the government goal is to prevent crashes and reduce injuries. The government goal isn't to teach people how to operate a motorcycle. I mean, governments don't teach people how to scuba dive or teach people how to fly an airplane. So the question is, why are governments putting money into teaching people how to physically operate the motorcycle? So I'm going, let somebody else. It's not that learning how to ride, to physically operate, isn't really important. It certainly is, but let private enterprise do that part. And if the government goal is to save lives, then put the government money behind things that the research indicates might work for saving lives.
Right. So I guess that might
question. I don't have an answer to your marketing
right,
question.
because I
It's a
feel like
great
we
question,
sort of,
but-
yeah, I feel like we sort of have that, even just with the BRCU in the level 2 classroom, that students arrive there and their expectation is that they're going to learn how to ride a motorcycle, and they're sitting through the 5 hours of classroom and they're thinking to themselves, when are we going to get to the part about riding a motorcycle, right?
Absolutely. Yep. It connects to one of the reasons where that we identified that current rider training might not work. You know, and let's just talk about the Motorcycle Safety Foundation curriculum, because we know there's a bunch of stuff in there about perception, judgment, and decision making. But the participant is so focused on learning to ride that they just simply don't internalize that other stuff. You know, as a 16-year-old sitting in class, that's just fluff stuff that I know these people have to tell me about, but I'm not terribly interested in that. So,
Or even the 40-year-old.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
This is Lynn again in New York. I think that this is where we as coaches need to sell the classroom by making the content relevant to them. And there's all kinds of great ways to do that. And before, someone was talking about the behavior, and one of our activity sheets, it's 7 or 8, I think, you know, addresses that. And my understanding is that that sheet was in there because in the military studies, they found that the riders that crashed, it wasn't that they didn't know what to do, but that they made a decision to do something else.
Yeah.
And I lay that right out to the students. And, you know, we had an incident locally where a service member made a series of poor choices that led to a disastrous crash. And, you know, it wakes people up to that. And range exercise 8 is another place where I see light bulbs going off, where students start to think about the role that they play in the outcome of their riding. You know, that perception counts and how they're thinking about their ride counts. So, you know, if we can up our game, it might not get new faces in the door, but once we have them in the door, I think it's our job to grab their attention and make them see these parts.
Yeah. I think there's, Lynn, there's a huge difference as a rider coach for me being in the classroom and saying, okay, we got a bunch of activities here that we have to do, so let's get through them. There's a huge difference between that, which I'm afraid happens way too often, versus the description that you just made. Okay, so you know, I don't know whether anybody else has that opinion, but when I float around and see some conducting of the level 2 classroom, too often I see it. Okay, we got a bunch of activities here. Let's blow through them.
I agree with that.
I have two people with the hands up for questions, and I don't know who came first. So I'm going alphabetically with Kathy.
Thanks, Don. I'm just struggling a little bit with the statement, turn the basic operational skills training over to private enterprise, because in a significant number of training schools all around the country, that's exactly what they are, is private enterprise. They're not managed by the government in any way. So I'm struggling to understand exactly what you mean by that, Dan.
It may be coming out of my experience here in the state of Michigan. In Michigan, we have combinations of private enterprise and public providers. So the public providers get the whole rider education program is funded by a portion of money from my license and my registration renewals, and the Michigan government uses that money at someplace in the neighborhood of $1.2 million or $1.3 million or $1.5 million, and I know it's bigger in other states, to provide grants to public agencies to conduct rider training. So I know there is a combination. There's a combination in Michigan, and in other states it may all be private.
Yeah, I can tell you that where I used to train years ago before working for MSF, $0 were provided by the state. So, you know, to me that seems like I can understand thinking that way because that's what your experience is, but it makes me uncomfortable as a blanket statement for across the country and rider education as a whole, because it's not quite accurate.
I'll try to do some, I will do some research and try to find out, you know, what percentage of states, you know, function like Michigan or something along that line, because that's great feedback.
Yeah, I think it's worth knowing too.
Sure, absolutely.
And the next question was from Jeff in Florida. Okay, you're muted.
I'm muted? Oh, sorry.
Oh, I got you now. Go ahead.
I'm normally in North Carolina. I'm down here in Florida briefly, helping my parents out. Anyways, I had the way you worded some of those statements were that training, the level of training, and it didn't really make a distinction between, you know, entry-level training versus advanced training. I know the MSF BRCU incorporated this level 2 stuff. I thought specifically to address that that disconnect between the operational skills and the behavioral adjustments that are needed. Has there been any research that either confirm that, or is the change from the BRC 2013, the BRCU, has that had any effect on what research? I think you did probably go over some of that, but just wanted to be clear that, or even taking advanced level training that goes more into the behavioral stuff, like specifically the old ARC, the ARC, which went in a lot into that behavioral stuff, or other programs that do, they actually take you out on the road and learn road skills and, you know, and ways to be safer out there. Anyways, I'll shut up now.
The short answer is no. There's nothing. There's no research to distinguish between the MRC, the MRC RSS, the BRC updated, or there's no research comparing Motorcycle Safety Foundation curriculums at any level compared to curriculums from other providers. The research that is available is mostly old, meaning it's mid 80s to mid 90s, and generally it is targeting a basic curriculum of some sort, not even necessarily identifying where that curriculum, who is the curriculum sponsor. It certainly is my belief, and would be my understanding, that the Motorcycle Safety Foundation looked at this type of research and essentially said, Kathy can confirm this, or Ray or anybody else, essentially said, it's extremely important that we have a strong component related to perception, judgment, responsibility, decision making. So when we update our MSF curriculum, we're going to make sure that we have a strong component that addresses those areas, because the research indicates that those areas are extremely important in our efforts to reduce crash risk. So, you know, MSF didn't just throw that stuff in there just because, you know, Kathy and Ray and all their colleagues thought it was fun. They put it in there because they're looking at the research and saying this stuff is critically important. Has it been evaluated? Not to my knowledge.
I'd like to make one addition to this thought process. You know, as I listen to everybody, we've kind of split up some of the basic developmental motor skills on one side and then the intellectual executive functions on the other. I would state that probably if you don't have them together at the same time, working on both motor skill and judgment and interlinking what's going on in the classroom and what's going on the range, reinforcing that it probably has less effect on the student, and separating those probably isn't a wise idea.
Hey, John, I think that ties right in with what Lynn said earlier about how important that is. And I certainly, you know, it certainly makes sense what you're talking about. And a lot of that, a lot of the responsibility for making what you described happen falls on the shoulders of the individual rider coaches who are teaching the course. So we have to understand that. We have to understand how critically important it is to meld those concepts together.
And so with that, I'd kind of like to wrap this up. Everybody, round of applause for Dan here. Good topic of discussion, one I think that we could probably go deeper into in the future. But I would like to move on to the small group discussion for the evening. And I'm going to quick share a screen here with you. This is the challenge that we put up about a week and a half ago as part of the preview for last week, and also as part of the preview for this week. And what I'd like to do at this time is go ahead and break up everybody into randomized small groups. And within your small group, if you would please get to know each other a little bit. We're going to take about 15 minutes. And once you're all comfortable, start discussing what the top 10 rider coach traits, characteristics, competencies, and abilities you think are important for every rider coach. So if I get a bunch of thumbs up, is everybody ready? And what I'll do is I will split us off into small groups at this time. We'll be in 6 different rooms. I think that's about the number we're at. And 15 minutes, and then we'll all come back and we'll discuss it as a large group. So here we go.
That was good. I enjoyed that.
We were discussing how effective a tool the small room breakout is. That's very neat.
If only you had more time in the small group breakout room, right?
That was pretty good,
Not
Don. I
necessarily,
enjoyed
no.
it.
All right. So I think we have everybody back now. I noticed that Michelle Matheron's group actually put some of their stuff out in the chat so other people can see. Pick a spokesperson from your group and share what you came up with, please.
You want us to go in any particular order, Don?
I don't care.
All right. Well, let's see. I represent the former New Englanders, Wisconsin, and let's see. We had some. Chris, where are you from? You're Wisconsin too, right? So we'll say former New Englanders in Wisconsin, folks. And I rattled off 10 things from an exercise. Actually, Don, you had given me. And we didn't have a lot of disagreement, but I'd like to say it kind of boiled down to one of the things we think is probably the most treasured characteristic of a good rider coach is the ability to read the class and read the student and give them what they need at that particular moment. Not just get up there and flap our gums and read from the cards or read from the activity sheets, but do our best to, within a group or you know, an individual that you're coaching, to read what they need and get it for them as succinctly as you can.
Any thoughts? Get a thumbs up there. What about another group?
Josh, were you taking enough notes to cover our group?
Yeah, I think so. I think I did. So some of the top things we were talking about, most of our group didn't get the handout, or weren't part of us with the handouts ahead of time. So we did end up sharing it on the screen and had a really nice discussion. It was myself, Jeff, Peter, and who else was with us? Sarah. And some of the top things basically that we came up with is being able to, you know, determine another person's temperament is really an important attribute to coaching. Being able to evaluate and coach effectively, possess character, competencies, and leadership skills. And the 4 riding subtasks, knowing those seems really important for a rider coach. But those were some of the, we ran out of time really quick, but those were some of the top things that we ended up covering.
Any feedback? And if not, the next group, please.
Real quick, their list sounded very, very similar to ours. But again, at the top, being able to effectively evaluate and coach your students, adapting to the students as they are or as they need to be communicated to.
You know, in our group, we had a little bit of a split between general competencies and those interpersonal skills. And, you know, as I've been thinking about it, you know, in the moment or so since we talked about it, I think part of that discrepancy might have to do with the time frame in which you're considering it. I was viewing it more from the standpoint of, as a site administrator, as a trainer, what am I looking for in a rider coach candidate? And that would be those interpersonal skills, because I can train them up to do the other stuff. But once they are coaches, those general competencies, gain a little bit more importance in addition to the interpersonal stuff.
Okay, I was part of group 2, and our list included having the right knowledge, skills, the attitudes, the habits, values, integrity, emotional intelligence, resiliency, grittiness, adaptiveness, being a team player, being able to self-assess and also to assess and coach properly your students.
Thank you, Sarah.
I was in group 3 with Ted, Dennis, Diane, and Rick. We came up with a dozen or so things, but if I'm just trying to mentally sort those, they kind of fall under the general categories of empathy, patience, honesty, that kind of thing. Attitude, being a lifelong learner, messaging, courtesy, customer service, and then flexibility, things like observational skills, being able to tailor your coaching to the student, having situational awareness. I guess that's it.
Thanks, Laura.
And even though they've got some things on the screen there, this is Michelle, some things in the chat window, sorry. One of the primary we had was the patient sympathy part, which is basically a student-centered attitude. If you're all about your students, you're going to do whatever it takes as far as all the other things go to provide your students with the best class that you can give them.
Thanks, Michelle. Do we have one more?
Sorry, that was from group 1.
No more volunteers, huh? That's okay. So when you went through the exercise with the people, did it feel like you were of like mind in what you thought would be good traits or characteristics, competencies, and abilities for rider coaches? I would hope so. I'll say a little bit more about this before we close up today, but since we're just a little bit after 8, I think we can go ahead and push to the next topic, if you all don't mind, of course. And what I'd like to do at this point is share the screen again and then turn it over to Ray's Tribe Talk bonus. And he has a question he'd like to ask everybody. You're on mute, Ray.
Sorry, I got sidetracked there. Okay, not really a question, just a point of discussion. I asked Don to put this slide up here because this is looking at the current and the future. In the green, you've got our current versions of the basic rider course. Depending upon this shutdown, when it ends, we'll be real close to releasing the level 2 e-course. Right now, we're saying that's an E2, meaning approximately 2 hours. So it looks like the new sweet spot for us is going to be what's in black at the bottom there, the E3 by E2 by 11, because some of the activities that aren't doable very well in the level 2 e-course will move to the range. So that raises a bunch of questions about, okay, how long do we carry the green version? What would your state, what would your site, what would you in your whatever position you're in as a stakeholder, which one would you encourage people to move toward to get to some of that effectiveness in case somebody measures it, the way Dan's been talking about it. So I just wanted to throw that up there and see what people see as a response. What's in red is what we did not allow, the E3 by 10, so we would ensure there'd be that rider coach interaction in a social environment, particularly the classroom, but that's going to switch all to the range if we do go with the E3 by E2 by 11. And you can see the asterisk there. It goes into some of the things that might have to move to the range, much like we're doing in that interim. If those of you, if any of you have seen that interim content we came up with, because we're moving some of the things to the range, and it'll be a fun activity, I guess, to see how many people embrace that. So there's a lot going on in that slide. And then from an administrative standpoint, you've got the bottom box there where you have other effects and how this changes a lot in the system once we do this. So what's going to work best for most? So that's my question. What here works best for most?
May I ask you a question, Ray?
Oh, sure.
Is COVID driving the E3, E2, or is that just another evolution of the basic rider course?
It's another evolution. We've heard from a few states that are saying that, you know, they can't continue to pay rent for classrooms, that the E3 that they've been using, they're very happy. It's been successful. The students like it. Why don't we do a level 2 e-course and then see what the ramifications of that are? Of course, we're not able to test it because we're shut down, basically. So we're coming up with the completion of this e-course and try and say, okay, if we're after training, what are we going to lose if we lose that 5 hours of level 2 as it currently exists? What are we going to gain if we do the E2? Those are all, you know, pressure points or forces at play to see, okay, what's the best course of action here? There's a lot of people that like to do just the E3 by 10. Those are the people that that I would say they're after throughput, after simplicity, after filling the square. Those that want the depth would go with the sweet spot in our currently existing system, E3 by 5 by 10. And then the modern age of people doing everything on their smartphones, we accommodate that with what's in black there. So a lot of variables. That hopefully answers your question.
Thank you, Ray.
Sure.
I guess if people don't have access to classrooms, that would make, you know, formal, you know, in-person knowledge testing be more difficult. And so, you know, would testing be a component of the 2 e-courses would be one of my questions. And, you know, also legislatively, you know, currently in our state, they want that 5 hours of classroom. So it would require, you know, changes in the legal stuff.
Yeah.
The formal in-person knowledge testing, you know, I can't speak for any state other than Wisconsin, but Wisconsin does not use the in-person knowledge test. We use the 3-hour e-course to satisfy the requirements of the knowledge test.
Nice, good. Hey Ray, it's Al. I think if you would have asked me 6 months ago, I think you would have had a hard time with level 2 being e-based. But I think in today's day and age, that's changed dramatically. So I think you'll probably have a lot bigger acceptance now.
I'd be curious to see what the MSF has come up with for the level 2 e-course. And is an hour enough for all the asterisk things on the slide, the wall chart, the fatal vision goggles, all of that?
On the surface, I'm thinking it might be less fun on a coaching level to have level 2, just being selfish about it.
Got Jeff from Florida with his hand up, and South Carolina. You're muted again, Jeff.
There we go. How's that? Okay, I thought I hit the unmute, but yeah, I think some of the things that I was curious about were answered there. But I wanted to be clear that the what you envision being E3, E2, 11, so that extra time spent on the ranges to cover some of the group activities that can be done online and the in-person knowledge test. So I think that would be a very good approach. But I think, like someone else said, I'd like to see what E2 is before coming to a final judgment.
You mean you don't trust us?
Trust but verify. Isn't that how the saying goes?
And that was
All
Ronald
right.
Reagan.
Dan, you had your hand up. Did you want to jump in here?
Well, my question, I'm
You're good.
unmuted, I'm good?
Yeah. Yep.
My question is to Ray. My view of the level 2 right now is that the influence, the kinds of things that we're addressing in level 2, the small groups and the interaction and the discussion and the leadership of the coach, I see as extremely valuable. So my wondering is, how comfortable are you with the ability to attack those topics in an E format?
Question. Fortunately, it's not about me, but it's about what we can effectively implement based on theory and research. But it begs the question that you raised in yours. Let's assume, let me give you a specific example. I had the good fortune to be in a state a few months ago where I gave them the highlights of level 2 classroom. Absolutely huge hit with these stakeholders in this rather large state. But the question afterwards, the statement afterwards, well, Ray, you can do that, but our rider coaches can't do what you do. So if we have a group of rider coaches that can't pull off what you're talking about, Dan, I happen to think they can, that's my belief, but I don't know what's really getting played out there. If you have rider coaches that don't have that capability, then we're better off going with an E2, because at least we're ensured the content gets there and is framed properly. It's not going to the depth it would be with a good rider coach using the 5 hours. So it's going to be, there can be a lot of trade-offs.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Dave Halen.
Thanks, Don. Yeah, Ray, my concern, particularly in light of what Dan was going through, my concern is, in the state I work in, we use E3 by 5 by 10, and I recognized, when you first introduced it, hey, this is the real important part, the level 2 classroom. So my concern, in light of what Dan shared with us, and the change in 5 hours to 2 hours, I guess I'm concerned, is it going to be as good for the students to have a shot at maybe affecting behavior and decisions? I do trust you, known you for a long time, so I'm hopeful. And of course, I also have to make sure I can sell it to the DMV who sponsors our program here.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Ron?
Yes. Thank you. This really, I like this. It allows our students to come in with a broader base, as Ray said. It also allows us to have some time to go through some of the external activities, and that's where we're going to be able to be a little bit more positive and make sure that we get all of our bases covered. You're going to schedule 11 hours of range. That's probably 2 days. So now you've got 16 hours, and so you've got a little bit of time to play with. It also accomplishes the issue of our students wanting to come in and just get on the motorcycle and ride. So I see all this as a real positive. I haven't seen very few negatives. Thank you.
Thanks, Ron. Anybody else?
I think that I would just like to kind of add on to what other observations that have been made here, expressing the concern that delivering a level 2 in-person classroom is a fairly high level skill to do a good job with that. That's my opinion, at least. And if you are now taking that out of it, that's good from a coach and a training point of view, I guess, but then you're shifting some of those level 2 classroom activities over to range. And if coaching then becomes more motor skill focused, range focused, I think that there's going to be some loss of quality in that coach's ability or willingness to conduct those exercises on the range to a high level. you know, that hopefully people were getting to in classroom, if that makes sense.
Well, I agree with you, and kind of along those lines on a RiderCoach prep level, if those classroom components are no longer going to be done in the classroom, there has to be a way to gauge the candidate's understanding of that content, because they're still kind of responsible for covering it in some manner or other in the range sessions.
That would be my concern, Lynn, is, you know, are they knowledgeable enough in what's going on in E3 and E2 to integrate it into a more compacted 11 on the range and still tie in those behavioral components. Kathy's got her hand up. Mute. I'll get you. Try again, Kathy.
Sorry. I was watching the chat, and it seemed like there are several folks concerned about the idea of the existing options going away. And although I haven't had that much discussion about this yet at the office, but it doesn't seem to me that we are going to do away with these other options. I think the concept is, and Ray can correct me if I'm wrong, is to add a few more options to deal with the current situation that may also be the wave of the future, but I don't think it necessarily means that E3 by 5 by 10 is going to be dropped by MSF. Maybe Ray, you can jump in and correct me or validate what I just said.
We're going to burn all the materials we have currently and going to implement what's in black.
Yes.
No choice. Now, of course, we'll carry everything in green indefinitely, and probably still not allow the E3 by 10. I wouldn't think anybody want to do the 5 E2 by 11, but who knows? So we're probably just going to add the green and black together, is my guess at this point, assuming the E2 is accepted as valuable.
Thank you both.
And Matt Berry, please.
I had one thing, but it just changed. Aren't there still states using BRC, 2001? I'm a relatively new rider coach. Instead of BRC2, BRCU. So it's not like the MSF immediately phases out something when they come up with something new. The thing that I had, now I totally forgot. If I think of it, I'll raise my hand again.
All right.
Well, I'll follow up with that. Maybe you'll think of it, but yeah. I go back at MSF a long way, back in the early 70s when they started. They used to do what I just said. They used to burn the materials in essence, and you come out with something brand new over the summer, train up all the chief instructors, and that curriculum was for everybody. Once we had the explosion the past 20 years or after that, in the 80s and 90s, states couldn't make the turnaround quick enough, so we had to carry all these versions. So states had time. It took 3.5 years for the states that decided to stay with MSF to go from the RSS to the BRC. And not much was lost. We went to the BRC updated because people understood we weren't just, being a sales foundation. So I hope that addresses some of what you might have been thinking about. But no, we have to keep carrying those because there's such a variety of stakeholders out there.
Any more comments? If not,
when will the E2 be available for review?
For review, that's a good question. Well, it's probably 90% completed. Resources are very sketchy right now. I'm not sure some of you in this Tribe Talk may get an invitation to view it. I certainly want to put that in the hopper as a possibility. But I don't know if we can make that happen. We may just finish it and say, here it is. It's unknown at this moment.
I volunteer to help.
So I wanted to get your feedback, and it's been fabulous.
Ray, I just had one comment as well. What I like about it is hopefully it'll get us on level 2 in Massachusetts. I've been, a big advocate for it here, and they've been kind of dragging feet because they're like, well, we can get away with 5 hours and 10 hours, but we don't want to add all these extra hours. Or if it's E3, they wanted like an E3 410, but I think this hopefully gets us, you know, where they want to actually do it, because I've been trying to push it forever. The other thing I was going to say is keeping the other stuff. Those of us that are trainers, obviously, we'd still have to teach level 1 classroom and level 2 classroom in our RiderCoach prep, so that the students, because they're nationally certified, really have to be able to do it all. And I think it's so much more valuable to do that anyway.
Okay, I remembered my thing, if I can jump in for a second.
Go ahead, Matt.
The national certification and the RiderCoaches, if we continue to teach that in RCPs, a good RiderCoach should be able to work in those activities that will still be needed within the range, keep it light, keep it fun, keep it informative and relevant, and work it in between exercises. It doesn't take long to do, for instance, the eye chart exercise, but we can keep that fun and relevant pretty easily, I think, as long as we understand why we're doing it as RiderCoaches.
Dave.
Anybody else?
I just wanted to comment. I wanted to comment that he did say good RiderCoaches.
That was where I was going. That's a big if we have good RiderCoaches. You know, Matt's saying that it's easy, or it could be to incorporate those activities onto the range. That to me is a big if.
I completely agree with that's a big if. You're absolutely right on that, and I maybe didn't make that clear enough. We do need to be training our RiderCoaches to be at that level, and hopefully encourage RiderCoaches to be at that level that they can facilitate like that.
Absolutely.
Well, good. You brought up the issue we've got with RiderCoach trainers now. I'm glad you said that. Those of you laughing understand what I'm.
All right, before this goes any further down that rabbit hole, I do have a poll for you all tonight, little check on knowledge. Polling is up. Please go ahead and read the questions and answer at your will. For those unable to see what's on the screen, I'll read it off for you. I know some people don't have that option on mobile devices. The first one is the best form of evaluation of motor skills has proven to be, first choice is expert judgment. Second choice is videotaping viewed by experts. Third choice is paper and pencil tests of concept. Fourth choice, written tests of procedures. And fifth choice, self-assessment. The second question is, besides practice itself, the most important variable for determining learning is, first response is knowledge and skills test. Second response is repetition to form habits. Third response is study of results and consequences. Fourth is augmented coaching. And fifth is information feedback. We're at about 24%, so must be difficult questions tonight.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
For number 2, the word determining, you mean determining factors in the learning experience?
Best practice itself, the most important variable for determining the learning. Identifying what learning has happened. Is that a better way to state it?
Okay, so we could look at it from a standpoint of evaluating after the learning has happened then. Is that what we're getting at in the question? I'm trying to understand the question.
Give me a second here. I'm going to read the answers. So, as written, I would say it's what we use to measure learning.
Okay, so assess after the learning has taken
Or,
place.
or during, I think that would be viable
Okay.
too.
Thank you.
We're at 75%. %. And looking at who is out here, that's probably the top. I'll give you 10 more seconds. And I will end polling and share the results for those who wish to see it. Give me a second while I take a capture of this for posterity. And the answer that was selected most for the first question is self-assessment, 69%. The actual answer is expert judgment, came in at 15%. For number 2, information feedback came in at 54%, and was the most selected response, and it was correct. It was correct. Information
Where did
feedback.
these answers come from, Don?
This actually came from an old RCT quiz. And I've yet to find in print some of the answers, so I'm not going to go in depth right yet. But a group of scholarly trainers came up with this, and I'll leave it at that. Somebody really smart, not me. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing the results here. And since we're about 30 minutes over tonight, but it's a good 30 minutes, always is with you folks, we'll go ahead and wrap this up. Does everybody see the share? All right, so everybody, round of applause for Dan Petterson, and certainly Dr. Ochs for what he has done for us tonight. I appreciate the attendance and the knowledge and the good thought-provoking questions. I still have this program administrator challenge out there. If somebody knows that their administrator would like to be involved with a work group, please contact me. I put an email out to them. We just want to get together and kind of talk about the things we talk about in Tribe Talk to see if we can address some of our challenges and maybe pass on some of our successes with each other. Next week, we have Miss Sarah with Reflecting on Resiliency. Is Ted still here? I think we lost
Yes,
him.
sir.
Oh, there you are. Sorry, you were at the top. Would you like to talk a little bit about what you're planning?
We're just going to jump into another round of overcoaching and possible solutions.
All right. Overcoaching with Ted. Kind of a parting shot. Something I was thinking about heavy, and I like to share that because you guys get me to thinking a lot. You have really great questions and my mind wanders. What came across my mind today was relationships, because in order to have a good relationship, you kind of have to trust somebody. And I noticed that the people that continually show up to Tribe Talk are people that I trust. You know, when I hear them talk, when I hear them speak, the questions that they provide, the ideas that they throw out there, they help me to trust you all even more. And so I want to say thank you for that, because trust is something that is not given lightly, and it's greatly appreciated when you can find people you can trust what they talk about. So I wanted to enhance our relationships a little bit more as a tribe by letting you know I really appreciate your input and what you give to the tribe. I hope that you'll bring other people in, that you'll volunteer to maybe host a session like the previous people and the future people will, because that helps us to build that trust, helps us to build those relationships, and shares the great knowledge that I know you all possess. Be motivated, be a mentor, or be mentored. And for the mothers out there, happy Mother's Day. That is it for tonight. Thank you very much.
Bye,
you,
everybody.
Don.
Stay healthy and safe.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Thanks, everyone.